The sun is low, and swallows are everywhere. They dance above a field stretching to the horizon between Padua and Venice, where the plain begins to open out. You don't see them all at once. Your eye can't follow so fast. But you see movements, quick arcs, the web of flight paths they weave with each other. It's not chaos, what you see, but it's not order either. Not as humans understand order. It's something third, a pattern creating itself, choreography without a choreographer, music without notes. The swallows fly as though asking a question and answering it at the same time, as though their movement were itself the message. The train carries you slowly through this hour. The sky above the field turns golden, then pink, then a violet that shouldn't exist, yet does. The swallows are dark against it, tiny black exclamation marks against these rising colors. They're faster than the train, freer than the train, and yet they don't fly away. They stay above this field, performing their dance, which they've danced 1,000 times before this day, and will dance 1,000 times after. You don't think of individual swallows. That would be impossible. You think of swallowness, the essence of this flying, the way they shape the air with their presence. They're like thoughts that have taken form, that have manifested above a field, saying, "There is life, there is joy, there is reason to move swiftly and gracefully." The air above the field is full of insects. You know this because the swallows are constantly opening their mouths, catching, swallowing. The whole field is a food chain made visible through the swallows' movements. The invisible becomes visible through them. The insects you can't see become real because the swallows snap at them. That's a kind of realism beyond the visual. There's a freedom in the swallows' movements that you can't explain but can feel. They don't fly because they must. They don't have to fly from Padua to Venice. They fly because flying itself is the purpose, because the air is space and swallows are freedom. In this dusk, they have no goals except the next wing beat, the next sweep, the next insect. The train doesn't slow. It crosses the field at the same speed as always, but it seems to you as though time is slowing, as though the minute fractures into many seconds, and the swallows have time to make each wing beat visible. It's as though nature stretches this twilight hour into a long minute to give you one last gift before night comes. The swallows are social, but not in the way humans are social. There are no leaders and no followers. There is only the collective understanding of space, of height, of distance between one another. They speak to each other in a language faster than words, purer than words. Their communication is pure movement. Your eyes follow a single swallow, for a moment, just one. It's dark brown with a white belly. You see the marking when it turns, when the light falls differently. It's neither larger nor smaller than the others, but it is this one, and you follow it as it led darting up and down, as it gains height and loses it again, as it does things for which there are no names. The place between Padua and Venice, it's not famous like the city itself. It's a plain, sometimes marsh, sometimes dry, with fields and trees that seem like pauses in a text. But the swallows make this place into a sanctuary, into a place of holiness, simply by flying above it, by honoring the space with their movements. There's a moment when a swallow shoots so close past the train window that you hear the sound of its wing. Not with your ear, but somehow deeper, with your whole body. It's a tiny hiss, a sss, saying, "I'm here, I'm alive, I'm free." The train and the swallow, two completely different ways of moving, two different religions of motion. For a moment, they share the same space. Your heart quickens. It's not fear or excitement, but something subtler. It's the realization that you and the swallow, though completely different, for a moment share the same minute, the same plane, the same golden hour of afternoon becoming dusk. Soon it will be dark. You know this. The swallows know it too. They fly faster, more intensely, as though trying to pack as much air, as much light, as much freedom into this last half hour as possible. It's not desperate, but intense. It's the most intense flying you've ever seen. The curves the swallows fly aren't random. They follow a logic matching the logic of the insect swarm, but also their own swallow logic. It's as though each swallow intuitively knows where the others will be, without seeing, without hearing. They fly toward something not physical but present, not visible but clear. Venice isn't far away now. The train will soon pull into the station, and the plane will be behind you. But these swallows will still be here, will fly tomorrow, the day after, all through the days of spring, will perform their play above this field, invisible to most people who take a different train, their windows closed. The wing beat of a swallow creates a tiny vortex in the air. You can't see it, but you can understand it's there. Thousands of swallows, thousands of wing beats, thousands of tiny vortices mixing together and creating new patterns. The air itself becomes a kind of spirit, filled with movement and purpose. A thought comes to you as you watch the swallows, that perhaps you too live in an air current larger than yourself, that your movements too create tiny vortices, that you too are part of a larger pattern, recognizing and reinventing itself. The swallows show you something about the way the universe works, about how freedom and pattern dance together, how the individual and collective are inextricably mingled. The sky grows darker. Orange becomes red, red becomes violet, violet becomes blue. The swallows are now black strokes against these colors, have become pure movement, form without content, choreography without bodies. They've become more thought than bird, more possibility than reality. The swallows fade slowly. The sun sinks, and they disappear into the darkness that comes. But they've remained in you. This sight, this image of pure freedom, of pure purpose, of pure movement without thought, will stay with you long, will mingle with your dreams, will guide you through the night as the train heads to Venice and the swallows, somewhere behind you, continue their fluttering in the dark. My eyes grew heavy, so heavy, as if someone had gently laid a warm hand on my eyelids and said, "That's fine now. That's enough for today." And I heard the train, ta-dum, ta-dum, and I heard the quiet breathing of another traveler already asleep, and I heard the distant rushing of the wind at the window panes, and all these sounds were like a soft blanket laid over me, layer upon layer, warmth upon warmth, until I felt nothing but the quiet gliding of the train through the night. And the landscape outside grew softer. The outlines of the trees dissolved. The fields became dark expanses over which the moon sometimes let its pale light glide. I felt my breathing grow slower, felt my heart grow slower, felt my whole body sinking down into the warm embrace of the seat cushion, into the warm embrace of this train carrying me, without my needing to do anything. That was a good feeling, a rare feeling, to be carried without effort, simply trusting that the wheels keep rolling, that the rails lead on, that morning will eventually come. I met the restorer on a train from Florence to Zurich, on the long stretch over the Gotthard. It was October, and Tuscany still lay bathed in warm light, golden brown and gentle. But as we headed north, the sky grew grayer, the air grew cooler, and when we reached the Alps, it was already raining. A fine, quiet rain that wrapped the mountains in mist and made the world look like an old painting whose colors are slowly fading. She sat across from me, a woman in her early 60s, with a narrow face and hair pinned loosely in a knot, silver gray, with a few strands that had come loose and framed her face. Her hands struck me straight away. Long, slender fingers, nails cut short, and on her fingertips, tiny traces of color, a hint of ochre, a fleck of ultramarine, a glimmer of gold. As though she'd touched a painting just before leaving and carried the colors along on her journey. She had a small book with her that she was reading, but not the way one reads a novel, slowly, thoughtfully, as though weighing each sentence. And when the train entered the Gotthard Tunnel and the world outside vanished and only the rattle and the darkness remained, she closed the book and smiled and said, "I like tunnels. In tunnels, nothing happens and everything happens at once. You drive through the mountain and come out the other side, and everything's different. The weather, the light, the language. Like a painting you turn over." She was a restorer. For 35 years, she told me, I've worked on old paintings. In Florence, in the Uffizi, sometimes in the Pitti Palace, sometimes in small churches out in the countryside, where frescoes are crumbling on the walls and nobody remembers who painted them anymore. "I repair time," she said. "That's my profession. Time destroys everything, slowly, patiently, relentlessly. Cracks in wood, blistering paint, dirt that settles over centuries like dust on forgotten furniture. And I take it all away, layer by layer, until the painting's back, until the colors shine again, until the painter speaks again." She told me how she works. Millimeter by millimeter, she said, with a scalpel, a magnifying glass, a cotton bud. Sometimes I spend a whole day on a surface no larger than my thumbnail. "You need a patience that borders on madness," she said, and laughed quietly. "Or a kind of love that most people find rather peculiar. Love for something someone created 400 years ago and that you'll never meet, but whose handwriting you know, whose brushstrokes you recognize like the handwriting of a friend, whose hesitation you see, there, where the line becomes uncertain, and whose courage you admire, there, where it moves boldly and freely across the canvas." "The finest moment in my work," she told me, "is when the painting emerges from beneath the grime. You labor for hours, for days, and all you see is dirt and varnish and the traces of time. And then, suddenly, like a window opening, there it is. A color so luminous, so fresh, as if it were applied yesterday. A blue that has slept for 400 years under a layer of grime, and that now awakens and looks at you, as though saying, 'Here I am. I've been here all along. You just needed to look.'" She told me about a painting that moved her particularly. A Madonna, she said, in a small chapel near Siena, 15th century. Nobody knew who'd painted it. The paint was peeling, the wood was eaten by worm, and the parish wanted to dispose of it. But then I started working, and beneath the ruined surface was a face of such gentleness, such peace, that I had to stop working and simply look. 5 minutes, 10, simply look. Because that face looked back at me across 500 years with eyes that said, "I understand. I know how you feel, and it will be well." I asked her what restoration had taught her, and she looked out the window toward the Alps which vanished and reappeared in the mist like islands in a sea of cloud, and said, "Beneath every painting lies another one." That's what I've learned. Beneath the surface, there's always something else. Something older, something deeper, something truer. Sometimes an earlier version of the painting that the artist painted over because he had a better idea. Sometimes a completely different painting that someone later painted over with something new. Sometimes only the underpainting, the bare canvas, the beginning of everything. And it's the same with people. Beneath what one sees, beneath the face we show the world, there's always something else. Something that time has covered over. Something we've forgotten or hidden or no longer wish to show. But it's there. It's always there. You only need the patience to look for it, layer by layer, carefully, with love. She stepped out in Zurich into the rain, which was stronger here than in Tuscany, colder and grayer. She drew her coat around her and walked away, with the unhurried steps of a woman accustomed to working slowly and waiting patiently until the painting appears. And on her fingertips, the colors still glowed, ochre and ultramarine and gold, like little reminders of 500 years of beauty. Beneath every painting lies another one. I think of that when I look at someone and don't understand what I'm seeing. Then I remember her patient hands, the blue that slept for 400 years, the Madonna who looked back across the centuries and said, "I understand." The train travels on, and the rain drums on the roof, quietly and steadily, like fingers removing layer by layer. And beneath the rain, the night appears, dark and calm and beautiful. And my eyes grow heavy, and I let the layers fall, one by one, until only what was always there remains. Silence, warmth, sleep. The meadows are still dark, but not because it's night. It's early morning, the hour before the sun loses patience and shows itself at the horizon. The dew lies on the grass like tiny jewels, like tears the night wept before it left. The train travels between Tübingen and Horb, and you see it, thousands of tiny lights on the meadows, illuminated by the coming morning. The dew is the opposite of the wind, the bells, the lilac, the swallows. The dew is still. The dew is patience in its purest form. It waits for the sun to evaporate it, for the day to take it away. It's not aggressive, not loud, not spectacular. It's the quiet reality of night, the last thing darkness leaves the world before departing. There's something profound in this sight of dew-covered meadows. It's not beauty in the classical sense. It's too delicate, too small, too fleeting for classical beauty. It's a kind of beauty that exists only in transitions, in those moments between things, when the world is just waking and doesn't yet know what it is. Your breath fogs the window. You see a tiny circle of condensation on the inside of the glass, and in it you see the counter-image. Not the dew-covered meadows outside, but the reflection of your breath, your warmth, your presence. The boundary between inside and outside becomes a surface that creates shine, that refracts light. The dew is water that refused to evaporate completely. In the night, when temperature drops, the water vapor in the air becomes liquid, settles on the grass blades like tiny pearls. It's physics, but it's also poetry. It's the universe speaking with itself, sending itself messages in the form of water and light. You know this sight from somewhere, not from this journey, but from another, or from a time before trains came. It's a primordial sight, an ancestral memory. All people who travel on trains and wake early see this, see these meadows covered in dew. It's a ritual repeated across generations without anyone noticing. The colors are dimmed, not dark, but not bright. It's a time when colors don't yet have their full strength. The green of the meadows is pale, almost gray, but with a hope for green that shows itself. The sky is not blue, but a gray that could slightly turn violet if you look long enough. It's a palette that exists only for this 1 hour. Then it changes, becomes rainbow, becomes day, loses its delicacy. The dew reflects the coming light. Every water droplet is a tiny mirror, a tiny world, a tiny window into beauty. If you looked closely, but the train moves too fast for that, you could look into each drop and see the whole world, miniaturized and distorted, and yet whole. There are meadows the train passes through, and there are others it doesn't penetrate. These meadows belong to the dew, and the dew belongs to the morning, and the morning belongs to the time of transition. You're here only as a witness, one among many, an eye among countless others seeing this scene and then moving on, while the meadows are left to themselves. Soon the sun will come. In half an hour the dew will be gone, will have transformed into air, will have become invisible again. But now it's present, is real, is a manifestation of the night showing itself before it hides. Now you can see it and know that the night just was, that the world genuinely cooled, and that water took note of it. There's a statistic in your body. Your heart beats more slowly in this moment. The parasympathetic has taken over, has told you this is a safe time, a time when no danger lurks. The dew is not dangerous. The dew is a sign of peace, an assurance that the night was peaceful, that the world committed no violence against itself while you slept. Your eyes are heavy, but not from tiredness. They're heavy from the weight of longing for this minute passing, already in the process of passing. The train doesn't speed up, but time seems to accelerate. The dew becomes less visible with each moment, already fading from light and shadow, becomes only memory. Between Tübingen and Horb, it's a name without meaning, but now it's a place with infinite depth. The meadows here have something the meadows of other places don't have. They have this one journey, your journey, this one moment when you look and see what's there to be seen. There are trees at the edge of the meadows, still standing in shadow, not yet touched by the sun. The dew lies on them too, on their leaves, on their branches. It's as though the whole world in this moment consists of dew, as though everything just wept or just stopped weeping. The dew is a universal language common to all things, speaks to all surfaces. The train's speed is constant, but the perception of speed changes. With the dew, you seem slower, not because the train travels slower, but because this moment is denser, full of significance. It's as though time compresses. A normal minute becomes a 100-fold minute. A journey through an ordinary landscape becomes a journey through a sacred place. Your breath has grown calm. The train rocks you, and the sight of dew rocks you. There's a synchronicity between these things, between your breath and the rhythm of the wheels, between the gleam of dew and the gleam of your eyes reflecting that gleam. You're no longer separate from what you see. You're part of the scene, part of the morning, part of the dew. The meadows speak in this moment. They don't speak with words, but with the dew itself, with the way light refracts in each water droplet, with the way nature thinks its own thoughts through these tiny prisms. You understand this language without translating it. It's a more direct communication than language, one your heart understands before your mind can interfere. The dew doesn't become less visible, it becomes a different kind of presence. It becomes a memory you're having while still living it, a moment that's already passed while still being present. It's as though time folds, as though 2 or 3 layers overlap and you could see everything at once. The dew, its transience, and its eternity. The dew becomes morning dew, becomes past, becomes something no longer tangible. You close your eyes and can still see it. Tiny lights on dark green, a mesh of water and light, a message from night to day, a greeting, a farewell. The train carries you on, carries you away from these meadows, but the dew stays within you, becomes part of your dreams, will accompany you all night while you sleep, and the morning comes, and new thousands of dewdrops fall. I closed my eyes. Just for a moment, I thought. Just for a moment. But then came the images behind my eyelids. No clear images, just colors, soft colors. Blue and gray and a little gold from the lamp in the compartment. And these colors mixed into something that was no longer seeing and not yet dream. The train went on, ta-dum, and each ta-dum was a little further away, as though the train wasn't quite in the same space as me anymore, as though I were already half elsewhere, half in that land where tiredness makes its home, where everything becomes simple. And so we traveled on, the train and I, and the few other passengers sitting with me in the compartment or in the neighboring compartments, each in his own little corner of the world, each on his own way into sleep. The warmth of the carriage, the soft crackling of the heating, the clicking of wheels on the points, all of it became a shared song, a song without words, a song that carries you and calms you and says, "You may let go now. You may rest now." The train travels on for you. Time travels on for you. The world takes care of itself while you sleep. The scent comes before the sight. It's a sweet, creamy heaviness drifting into the compartment like an old dream suddenly made real. You breathe in and immediately know. Lilac. The first lilac of the year is blooming on the railway embankment between Leipzig and Halle. It's not a scent that attacks or overwhelms you. It's a scent that invites, that gently carries you along like a song from childhood. In this moment, you're no longer an adult man in a train compartment, but something older, something that can only think through sense. The patience of the lilac, gathered for months in the buds, all this preparation for this one moment, this one fragrant minute, becomes your patience too. The windows are open, and you make no move to close them. The wind that brings the scent brings also the moisture of spring, brings the warming that began a few days before. The scent turns a journey into an adventure. It's not mere transport, it's a pilgrimage to the places where lilac grows, where the earth finally remembers that beauty exists. You wonder how long the lilac blooms. A few weeks, you think, and then it's past, and the world must wait until next year. That gives it a kind of holiness, a kind of fragility. Everything fleeting is precious. You can smell it now, in this one journey, in this one moment. And if you weren't breathing, if you hadn't opened the window, if the train wasn't traveling exactly here on exactly this route at exactly this time, the scent would miss you. There are several shadings in this scent, not simply lilac, but white lilac and violet lilac, growing densely side by side, their fragrances mingling into something third, which is neither a color nor a definite smell, but a feeling. And beneath all that lies something else, a musty scent of damp earth releasing its shoots to carry new life. The railway embankment is a place between things. It's not quite nature, not quite human work. It's a strip of earth built for the rail, but which nonetheless insists on becoming wild. The lilac grows where no one planted it, where it has spread itself over years and decades, following the railway from line to line like a faithful spirit. Perhaps the seeds traveled on a freight train 100 years ago and fell here. Your body seems to relax as you breathe this scent. There's something in the chemical composition of lilac fragrance that communicates with your nervous system, that tells you, all is well, all will be well. Spring has arrived, and the world is safe. Your parasympathetic system calms itself, becomes gentler, gives you permission to simply be. Leipzig is far enough away that you don't want to think of it. Halle is still far enough that arrival seems unimportant. But this railway embankment, this strip of earth with its wild lilac bushes, is immediate, is present, is a form of presence that you cannot ignore. The scent binds you to this place, even as your body leaves it in passing. There's a belief among older people that lilac brings luck, that it's a kind of blessing. You wonder now, as you breathe the scent, whether that's true. Perhaps it's not magical, but it's true in the way that lilac gives your heart something it needs, something no medicine can give, something only spring and a chance journey through the right landscape at exactly the right time can give. The color of the lilac, if you open your eyes and really look, is not the violet you expect from memory. It's lighter, more delicate, almost at the border with white. It's the color of hope when you're hopeless, or of hope when you're already hopeful. It's a color that adapts itself to the mood of the observer. The train itself seems for a moment to slow, as though it too were touched by this fragrant minute, as though it too recognized that this is a minute when haste is wrong. The rhythm of the wheels shifts subtly, becomes more measured, becomes contemplation rather than progress. You don't ask yourself why the window is open, why the air comes in, why the lilac reaches you. You thank no one, ask no questions. You simply sit and breathe. The scent penetrates deeper, becomes not just something you smell, but something you taste, something you drink, something you draw into the deepest parts of your lungs where air transforms into blood, where this sweet fragrance dissolves into your being. There's a moment when the scent becomes overwhelming, not aggressively, but in the way that makes it impossible to think of anything else. The neurons of your brain are occupied with lilac, with color, with memory, with all the times you've smelt lilac before this moment. They all merge into a sum, into a number so large it seems infinite. Your eyelids grow heavy, but not from tiredness. They grow heavy from the weight of beauty, from the burden of the presence of a moment that means more than it should weigh. The lilac has substance, although it's only a scent. It has weight, it has duration, it has a depth that can't be measured. You feel it not only in your nose, but behind your eyes, where tears might gather if you let them. It's not sorrow, but completeness that leads to tears. Your head sinks back against the headrest of your seat. Gravity seems gentler. The scent carries you, holds you, has become a force that competes with gravity and sometimes wins. You don't need your muscles to hold yourself up. The lilac holds you. The air in the compartment has changed. It's no longer simply air, but is saturated with violet vibrations mixing with your breath. The train carries on, but the time in which the lilac is fragrant stretches out, becomes an eternity in miniature, a minute that lasts a lifetime. There's a kind of contentment that only lilac brings, not the contentment of consumption or possession, but the contentment of presence, of witness, of participation. The lilac doesn't offer itself to you. It doesn't offer itself to the rail. It simply offers itself to the air, and the air carries it to you. It's a triple relation, air and lilac and you, bound together for a journey, for a moment, forever. The embankment itself has a history. How many people have smelt this lilac? How many passengers have sat on trains and wondered where this marvelous smell came from? The lilac remembers, even if people do not. It remembers the journey of last year and the year before and the year before. It blooms for all these people, for all these journeys, for this one journey, your journey. The blooms on the embankment don't disappear when you close your eyes. They stay in your nose, in your memory, in your soul. The train carries you on between Leipzig and Halle, but the scent of lilac travels with you. It will bloom still in your dreams all through the night while you sleep and the trains go on. I closed my eyes. Just for a moment, I thought. Just for a moment. But then came the images behind my eyelids. No clear images, just colors, soft colors, blue and gray and a little gold from the lamp in the compartment. And these colors mixed into something that was no longer seeing and not yet dream. The train went on, ta-dum, and each ta-dum was a little further away, as though the train wasn't quite in the same space as me anymore, as though I were already half elsewhere, half in that land where tiredness makes its home, where everything becomes simple. And so we traveled on, the train and I and the few other passengers sitting with me in the compartment or in the neighboring compartments, each in his own little corner of the world, each on his own way into sleep. The warmth of the carriage, the soft crackling of the heating, the clicking of wheels on the points, all of it became a shared song, a song without words, a song that carries you and calms you and says, "You may let go now. You may rest now." The train travels on for you. Time travels on for you. The world takes care of itself while you sleep. It's the hour before the world truly wakes. The train passes through Salzburg, and you hear it. The bells. Not the bells of one church that fade into the background, but the bells of all churches speaking together into the gray morning. The ringing doesn't come from outside alone. It comes from within, too. Vibrates in the air of the compartment, penetrates the windows, the walls, your body. The train doesn't slow down, but you do. The bells ensure that time slows, that the world of speed is interrupted for a moment by the patience of the swinging metal. There are different tones, some deep, which you feel more than hear, vibrating in your chest, in your bones. Others higher, crystalline, which linger in your ears like the last word of a lover. Together they create a membrane across the landscape, an invisible cloth that gently wraps everything that wakes. The bells are not new. They are older than the train, older than the station, older than your life. In their sound, the history is woven. Centuries of mornings, all the same, all different, all with this ringing that says, it is time to wake. It is time to greet the world. It is time to live again. You don't close your eyes. The sound demands that you listen, that you are present. It's no background noise that can be ignored. It's an address, an invitation, a touching of the bell on something deep within you that answers without speaking. Badischl is still far, and yet the journey there is already embedded in this sound, in this moment. The bells write the route for you, signal where you are, who you are in this moment of waking. You are someone who hears the bells, someone sitting on a train while a church whose face you don't see raises its voice. The rhythm of the bells is not even. There are pauses where one bell stops and another continues. In these pauses, the air itself seems to breathe. The space between the tones is as important as the tone itself. Silence is given air, given meaning. These moments of quiet are not the opposite of the ringing, but its necessary companion. The sun climbs higher. The window becomes golden with its light. The bells, still ringing, cut through this golden light, and for a moment, you can almost see how the sound waves ripple the air, how they spread in all directions, how they wake Salzburg and carry you with them. In your childhood, you heard such bells, not on a train, but in the village or town where you grew up. The sound is the same, timeless, unchanging. The bell from then and the bell from now are the same bell, swinging through your life, reminding you of days when you didn't yet know these moments would be precious. The train carries you onward, but the bells follow you. You cannot escape them because they've gone into you, have engraved themselves in your hearing, in your heart. They will accompany you all day, these bells, and perhaps forever. They will mingle with other sounds, but somewhere, deep inside, they will still be ringing. There's something comforting in the fact that the bells don't ring for you, not specifically for you. They ring for the city, for the faithful, for tradition, for time itself. You happen to be here to hear them. You are a witness, a quiet companion to this daily, repeated action. That removes the burden of significance, but gives you, at the same time, the lightness of simply listening. Words have no place here in this minute. Words are too small for what the bells say. They speak in a language older than language, speak to something in you that is older than your conscious self. It's direct communication, from metal to bone, from sound to soul. In the pauses between the ringing, you can hear the other sounds of the train, the gasping of the engine, the rolling of wheels, the squeaking of brakes. But they no longer seem disturbing, rather like part of the music. The train, too, is an instrument, a bell itself, speaking to the landscape, waking it and carrying it along. The bells slow. The ringing becomes rarer, grows softer. They show you that morning is beginning, that the church now turns its attention to other things. The message has been delivered. The day has been welcomed. Now it is time for people to live their days. You still sit, motionless. Your body has adapted to the music, has become rhythmic, has accepted the pulse of the bells. It's hard to leave this minute, hard to return to normal time where things rush forward. The bells have taken you from that time, have brought you into another dimension, one where slowness is virtue. A thought comes to you, not like a thought, but like a breath, like a sensation, that the bells, in every moment they ring, bring all the people in this city together. There isn't one for you, and another for the woman at the station, and a third for the child at school. It's the same bell, the same sound, penetrating all, and for one moment, a precious, fleeting moment, all people are at the same place, in the same minute, together woken. The temperature in the compartment has changed too. The warm light of the sun, filtered through the bell ringing, has warmed the space. Your cheeks are warm from the light, warm from the feeling. Winter here, in this minute, is further away than ever before. The bells have driven it away, have returned the world to the rule of light. You don't try to move. The train moves for you, and the bells move your soul. Everything else is unimportant. The ticket inspector, the other passengers, the destinations of the journey, all fade beside this one fact, that you live in this moment, that the bells have confirmed this life to you. The air in the compartment is now filled with the reverberation. It's as though every surface, the seats, the windows, the metal fittings, preserves the vibration, refuses to release it. The sound becomes a presence, something physical you could almost touch. In this echo, the power of the bells still lives, still their message, that the world is vast, that time is long, that you are safe, carried by rhythms older and stronger than your own. Your breath has slowed, your heart beats in a different rhythm, one dictated by the bells. You didn't want this to happen, but it has. The train, the bells, the morning air have worked together to remove you from your everyday self and to transform you into something deeper, something older, something wiser. You no longer ask why, no longer ask where you're going. You are only now the answer to the bells, only someone who hears and understands. The last bell tones fade away. They don't vanish entirely, but become a reverberation, an echo that travels on with the train. Your eyes grow heavy, your head sinks back, and in this moment between Salzburg and Bad Ischl, where the bells still vibrate in the air, you fall asleep, rocked by the rhythm of the bells that continues to sound in your dreams.
My eyes grew heavy, so heavy,
as if someone had gently laid a warm hand on my eyelids and said, "That's enough now. That's enough for today." And I heard the train, ta-dum, ta-dum, and I heard the quiet breathing of another traveler who had already fallen asleep, and I heard the distant rushing of the wind at the window panes. And all these sounds were like a soft blanket laid over me, layer by layer, warmth upon warmth, until I felt nothing more but the quiet gliding of the train through the night. And somewhere in this dark landscape, I thought still, other people sleep now in their beds, in their houses, and the moon looks down on them, and the moon looks down on us, and everything is in its place. The fields are in their place. The forests are in their place. The rivers are in their place. And I am in my place, here in this carriage, here in this warm cradle made of wood and cloth and metal, carrying me where I must go, without my needing to wake, without my needing to do anything but trust and rest. You sit in the compartment, and suddenly you know the winter is gone. The wind comes through the window, warm as the breathing of a sleeping child, and carries with it scents you've missed for months. Mainz has just passed behind you, Koblenz still far enough that the landscape has time to tell its story. This first warm air of the year, it's a return, not a beginning. It reminds you of days already lived, of years when the same wind blew through the same window. You breathe deeper without intending to, your lungs open like hands reaching towards something invisible. The scent is impossible, barely present yet, and yet you can smell it. It's not the scent of flowers, not yet. It's the smell of the earth waking, of damp bark, of brown leaves from last autumn dissolving. It's the smell of patience finally rewarded. Your shirt no longer sticks to your chest. That's a marvelous feeling after weeks of confinement. The heat comes from outside, not within. The train itself breathes easier. You feel it in the way the wheels roll faster without you questioning why. The rails know the reason. They've led through these valleys for generations. The window is a frame for mystery. Outside, the poplars are shifting and their buds have grown larger as the sun strengthens. The wind plays with them like green thoughts, not yet finished but awake, not yet spoken but present. You don't think of summer. Summer is too distant, too hot, too loud. Spring forbids you to think so far ahead. It draws your attention down again and again to this moment, to this breath, to this unexpected warming of the world. In this air lie all the promises of all the years entangled together. It's not the promise of abundance, but the promise of transition, that nothing stands still forever, that even the longest nights end. Your shoulders drop without you noticing. The train rocks you, but more gently now, as though it too understands what this wind means. Koblenz is still far away, and your attention is allowed to wander. It can scatter itself in the pockets of this warm current of air, which brings all the promises winter left undone. Window frame, landscape, light falling differently, not flat as in the winter months, but sideways, golden, searching. The shadows are shorter, more decisive. The world arranges itself anew. You don't close your eyes. The wind on your face is address enough. It's a kind of conversation with the season, requiring no words. Your body understands. Decades of bodies understand. The moisture on your forehead is mild, not the damp cold of steam heat, but living moisture charged with possibility. The smell of rain preparing itself. Not today, not tomorrow, but the message is clear. The earth hungers for water, and soon the hunger will be satisfied. Your hands, they're warmer now. The circulation improves. Your heart pumps strongly without hurrying. That is the wisdom of spring. Warming without haste, change without violence. Mainz station is now some distance behind. You won't arrive in Koblenz at any particular time. Arrival doesn't matter. What counts is this hour, this window, this wind telling you that winter truly is past, that your hope was not in vain. The air carries traces of smoke, too. Not from a fire, but from the chimneys of the houses you're passing. Wood smoke, very faint, like a memory. People still sit by their stoves, but tomorrow, next week, they'll open their windows and step out into exactly this wind that you're feeling now. The window itself grows warm beneath your fingertips. That's strange. The glass should have been cold, but the sun has finally made the effort to warm it. You can feel the different temperatures. The warm side turned toward the sun, and the side facing inward, still cool, but no longer cold. This little boundary line in the material is like a metaphor for what's happening in the world right now. The sky, you don't need to look at it to know it's growing lighter. There's a kind of brightness that seeps through even closed eyes. Winter had made the skies gray and flat. This spring wind carries a different sky with it, one that has depth, where clouds are not merely weights but movement, promise too. Your hands are truly warm now. The nerve endings in your fingertips, which have felt only distance for months, begin to wake again. The wind brushes them, and it's like a tender reminder. The world is alive, and you are part of it once more. There's a place between sleep and waking where time slows. The train carries you there, not because of its speed, but because of this stillness that spring creates. Winter was loud with its scratching and scraping. Spring is quiet, a whisper, the absence of noise. Only the rolling of the wheels, and even that sounds quieter, as though the rail has grown softer. You don't ask yourself why this wind matters so much. Your body knows. Generations before you have known that this wind means the end of one order, the dissolving of one rule. Winter said, gather yourself, hold yourself to boundaries, hide away. This wind says, let go, become porous, trust. Your eyes grow heavy. The rhythm of the wheels has merged with this warming, has slowed, become more rhythmic. It's like a song you've always known, but only now remember. The landscape outside has become too blurred to really see. There's shapes that move, colors that flow into each other, brown and green, where weeks ago there was only gray and white. The contrast is gentle, not harsh. Nature doesn't wrench itself abruptly from winter's stiffness, but eases itself out slowly, almost gently. The compartment is quiet. No other passengers, no voices, no squeaking from other windows. You're alone with this presence of wind, with this handover from winter to spring, which only you experience in this moment. It's a kind of privilege that chance has granted you. You don't ask why you're sitting here and not elsewhere. The train had taken you, and the wind has found you. The smell, it changes as the air grows warmer. It becomes more intense and at the same time more tender. It's no longer a scent of earth and decay, but one that smells of hope, of green thoughts beginning to take shape, and beneath, very deep, a hint of blossoms yet to come, gathering their strength for the grand appearance. Your chest rises and falls evenly. The breath, which in winter was shallow and labored, is now deep and full. The diaphragm expands as though opening long sealed chambers. With each breath of warm wind, you draw deeper into the season. Let it penetrate the deepest parts of your lungs, where winter still lingers and melts away. There's a music in this wind that only spring can play. It has no melody, it's rather a continuum, a steady wave flowing through your being. The train hums with it, a deep, soothing thrumming coming from the heart of the engine and spreading into every corner of the compartment. You sit in it like in a bowl of vibrations, of warmth, of promise. Your thoughts slow, become feelings, become pure sensations without names, without meaning, only being. the wind carries you onward. You don't ask where anymore. Your eyes fall closed. Somewhere between Mainz and Koblenz, in that golden hour of early afternoon, where the world finally feels as though it can breathe again. The train rolled gently on, and outside the world was now entirely dark. Just a few lights in the distance, solitary windows where other people too were settling into rest. I thought about how many people at that very moment were falling asleep across the world, each in his bed, in his compartment, in his room, and how we were all part of a great, quiet movement, a movement into sleep. The rhythm of the wheels on the rails, ta-dum, 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 was like the breathing of a great, friendly creature carrying us all together through the darkness, through time. I met the Birdwatcher on a train through the Danube wetlands east of Vienna, where the river grows wide and the land flattens into reeds and water and sky. It was late October, and the migratory birds were gathering for the great journey south. You could see them through the train window, flocks of starlings dancing over the fields, contracting and expanding like a single breathing organism. Dark clouds of birds against a sky the color of tin. She was a tall, slender woman in her mid-70s, with alert eyes behind a round pair of spectacles, and binoculars about her neck that hung as naturally as a piece of jewelry. Her hair was white and short, and stood up in all directions as though the wind had styled it, and her clothes were practical, olive green and weatherproof, the clothes of someone who spends much time outdoors and doesn't care what others think. She watched the starlings through the window with an attention that fascinated me at once. Not the casual glance of a tourist, but the exact, patient observation of someone who knows what she's looking for. Murmuration, she said, without taking her eyes from the glass. That's what we call it, when starlings fly like that, thousands of them moving as one, without a leader, without a plan, only by each single bird paying attention to its 7 nearest neighbors. That's all, 7 neighbors. And from that emerges this. I'm an ornithologist, she said, and finally looked away from the window. For 45 years. First at university, then at the national park, and now, since I've retired, everywhere. Everywhere there are birds. And there are birds everywhere. You only have to look. You only have to listen. She told me about listening. That was the first thing I learned, she said. Not looking, listening. Most people see birds, but I listen to them. And whoever listens to them hears a whole world hidden from most people. Every bird has its song, its calls, its language. The blackbird sings in the evening on the roof, that fluid, clear song that sounds as though someone's summing up the day. The chaffinch strikes its short, cheerful phrase, always the same, always with that little flourish at the end, as if to say, and one more thing. The nightingale sings at night, only at night, and its song is so complex, so full of variations, that you could spend a whole lifetime deciphering it. She told me about a night in the reeds. I sat on the bank of the Danube, she said, in a small hide of wood and cloth that I'd built myself. It was May, the nights were still cool, and I was wrapped in a thick blanket and drinking tea from a thermos flask. And then, at 3 a.m, the concert began. First, the reed warblers, nesting in the reeds, a quiet, rasping song that sounded like someone rustling dry leaves. Then the herons, flying over the water on heavy wings and sending their hoarse calls into the darkness. Then the cuckoo, always 2 notes, always the same, always comforting, And then, very slowly, the chorus of dawn. One bird after another joining in, like instruments in an orchestra. First the quiet ones, then the loud ones, until the entire wetland forest was singing in 100 different ways, in 100 different voices. And the sun wasn't even here yet, but the birds already knew it was coming. I asked her what the birds had taught her, and she touched her binoculars like someone greeting an old friend and said, "Whoever listens hears everything." That's the simplest and most important lesson. Most people don't listen. They hear sounds, but they don't listen. They hear the wind, but not what the wind is telling them. They hear the rain, but not how the rain sounds when it strikes different surfaces: leaves, water, stone, earth. And it's the same with people. You hear what someone says, but do you hear what they're not saying? The pause between sentences, the tone that changes, the hesitation before a word, the silence after a sentence. Whoever listens to birds learns to listen. Whoever listens to birds learns that the world is full of voices waiting to be heard. You only need to be still and attentive and patient, and then you hear everything. She stepped out at a small halt in the wetlands where the reeds reached to the rails and you could hear the ducks splashing in the water. She adjusted her binoculars, nodded to me, and vanished into the reeds, as quietly and naturally as a heron stepping into water. Whoever listens hears everything. I carry that sentence with me, and on nights like this, I listen. To the rain, to the rattle, to the wind, to my own breath. And I hear more than I thought. Much more. The train travels on, and I hear the rain on the roof, and the rattle of the wheels, and somewhere, very far away, the call of a night bird. Or am I imagining it? It sounds like a song that someone's singing for me, quietly, patiently. And my eyes grow heavy, and I listen, simply listen, and let myself be carried by the voices of the night. At night, you sometimes hear the clattering of metal, cables, roof tiles, something stirred by the wind, and I think of Rosina. Rosina, the postal clerk on the Zurich-Chur line, autumn 1926. A woman whose name sounded like a piece of music, but whose life was like a telegram, short, precise, essential. The mail trains were different from the passenger trains. They were faster, more dangerous, full of secrets, locked in letters, parcels, documents. Rosina was one of only a handful of women with that job, not many in the whole country. She was 32, with a gray gaze like old metal, and hands roughened like wood from sorting millions of letters. She came from a family of postal workers. Her father had been postmaster in Flumes, and she'd inherited the job like an inheritance of blood, as though only that mattered. Switzerland in those days was quiet, structured, filled with order. Rosina was order in its perfected form, a machine with a heart, or a heart with a machine's engine. 5 days a week, she drove that mail train from Zurich to Chur, 80 kilometers, which she covered in 3 hours. In the carriage behind the locomotive was her workplace, a chaos of shelves, bags, sorting boxes, stamps, ink, paper. She worked alone sometimes, or with another clerk, depending on the volume. In this season, autumn, there were many letters, business letters, love letters, reminders, congratulations. Rosina didn't deliberately read them, but she couldn't help seeing. an address from Zurich to St. Gallen, another to Paris. Sometimes letters that were torn or damp, letters that had fallen, that people had written through tears, that were old or sick people sending their last message. Rosina held these letters with particular tenderness, as though she were cradling a child. She had never married Rosina. She'd sometimes say that the letters were her family. A joker of a colleague had laughed, but Rosina was serious. She knew that every letter was a story, the story of a person, someone who had something to say, something so important that they pressed it into words on paper and sent it out into the world. She wasn't simply a sorter. She was a witness to the human soul. In her workplace on the train, rushing through the Swiss Alps, the mountains rising up against the sky, Rosina read the world in addresses and handwriting. She could see where love flowed, where fear hid, where hope might still take root. It was a silent knowledge, a private knowledge, which she never shared. On that October day, it was a Tuesday, and Rosina remembered the days always, for she wrote them in her logbook. A letter came into the carriage that was different. It was written by hand on thin, fragile paper that felt like silk, and the handwriting was old, trembling, but beautiful. The address was Herr Franz Keller, Zurich Fluntern, Zurichbergstrasse 24. Rosina recognized the name because this name appeared in the newspapers. Franz Keller was a known composer, old, probably dying. She'd read the news. The letter came from a place called Chur, from a woman, probably his daughter. Rosina couldn't read what lay inside, but she could feel the weight. This was not simply a letter. This was a testament, or a forgiveness, or a final hope. She sorted the letter carefully. She sorted all letters carefully. That wasn't unusual. But this letter received a special slot at the top where it wouldn't be crushed, where it would arrive like an intact shrine. She thought about this letter during the whole journey to Zurich. She imagined who had written it, an old woman probably in Chur, who needed her dying father who was no longer there, or a young woman who needed to tell her father something important before it was too late. Rosina didn't know which, but she knew that she was the only person who could carry this letter from hand to hand, from heart to heart. The station in Zurich was large and loud, filled with people rushing, dragging luggage, saying goodbye. Rosina left her carriage and went over to the main post office to sort the letter personally. She could have handled it like any other letter, but she didn't. She carried it herself to the sorting desk, and she watched as another clerk took it. Zurichbergstrasse 24, she said quietly. Please be careful with this one. The clerk looked at her in surprise. Rosina didn't normally speak to the other clerks, but that day she needed to know that this letter would arrive, that the last message from Chur would reach the dying man before time ran out. 3 days later, on the return trip to Chur, there was a new letter in the same sorting slot. It came from the same address, from the same writer, or was it a woman? This time the handwriting was different, written faster, more desperate. Rosina didn't understand what had happened, but she felt it. The composer was dead. This letter was a response, probably a grief or gratitude that the previous letter had arrived, that the words had been heard before it was too late. Rosina placed this letter too in the special slot, as though she were laying a flower on a grave. Years later, it was 1952, and Rosina had long been retired. She read in a newspaper that the works of Franz Keller had been rediscovered, a composer the world had almost forgotten. A couple of letters from his daughter were also mentioned, letters that showed he had been loved until the end, that love had been transmitted. Rosina read this story, and her hands trembled. She had known that these letters were important, that the words inside them would become immortal, not because they were beautifully written, but because a daughter had written to her father, and this letter was the final connection before the shadow came. She had carried love, not as content, but as force, as energy, as the invisible substance that made letters live. She was a postal clerk who transported not merely paper, but hope, grief, love, forgiveness, all the things people press into words and send out into the world because they cannot do otherwise. And now, old, perhaps in a care home or in her apartment alone, Rosina understood that her life had not been worthless. She'd carried thousands of letters, and in every letter was a little immortality, a little eternity, which she had guarded from Zurich to Chur, back and forth, year after year. She died in 1958, Rosina, old, alone, but with a life that was complete. She had carried letters every day for 40 years. She had held the world together, hand to hand. She died in her small apartment in Zurich, the walls covered with postcards, not written by her, but from people to whom she had delivered letters. Summer cards from Italy, greeting cards from Paris, Christmas cards from strangers who didn't know that an old postal clerk had collected and kept their words. No one came to mourn her, but on her bedside table lay the newspaper with the article about Franz Keller, and the page was folded, marked, read 100 times. That was her closeness to immortality, not as a name in a history book, but as an invisible force that carries love through the night, that protects words, that holds the connections. And now, in this night, I hear the clattering of metal, and I know that Rosina is still there, not as a person, but as a force, as a connection, as the invisible postal clerk who still carries letters between people who cannot see each other. Every letter someone writes, every word that is transmitted, Rosina is there, making sure it arrives, making sure love isn't lost in the night. And that is all a woman needed to be immortal. The train passed through a tunnel, and for a moment everything outside was dark, only the roar of it, only the echo of the wheels against the tunnel walls. Ta-dum, ta-dum. And then we were outside again, and the night took us back the way a mother takes her child back in her arms after a short outing. I thought how beautiful that is. Tunnel and night, and then tunnel again, and night again, and on and on, and on and on. And after a while, you can't tell anymore what's outside and what's inside because everything flows together, because everything becomes one, because sleep is so close now you can smell it. When the train stops somewhere and I smell flowers through the open window, unlikely at night, but sometimes it happens, I think of Ilse. Ilse, the flower seller on the platform at Marienbad, summer 1932. Not Ilse who bound large bouquets, but Ilse who sold single flowers with stories heavier than the stems themselves. Marienbad was a spa town, venerable, full of elegant people who were sick but wealthy. They came by train from the Orient Express or local connections to drink the water that was supposed to heal their illnesses. It worked sometimes, sometimes not. The people who came were loud, aristocratic, desperate. They had everything except hope. Ilse was 34, slender by nature, not by poverty. She came from a family of gardeners, but slender because she needed this job to live alone after her husband died in 1918. She wore a straw hat, always, dyed green with leaf patterns that itself looked like a small flower. She stood on the platform with a basket full of roses, carnations, lilies of the valley, simple flowers, not expensive, but true. The summer of 1932 was hot and unbearable. The heat made the flowers wilt faster, and Ilse had to go to the well every 2 hours to get water to keep the stems fresh. Another seller would have seen that as waste, wasting water on flowers that nobody needed anyway. But Ilse understood that every flower was a life, even if it was short. She changed the water twice a day, even though no customer noticed. Nobody noticed, but Ilse noticed. That mattered. She straightened her straw hat, wiped the heat from her face, and stood waiting. Her apartment was small, very small, with only 3 windows, and every evening when she came home, she had flower strings in her hair, and the apartment smelled like a garden. She had no radio, no family, no visitors, only flowers. She sewed flower garlands from dried petals to decorate the empty walls, to tell herself she wasn't alone, that life was growing everywhere. On summer evenings, when the heat finally relented, she'd sit on the windowsill and read old garden books inherited from her mother, full of notes: how to grow roses, how to prepare soil, how to read nature's signs. She had no garden, but she had these books, and that was enough. On that August afternoon, it was Wednesday. Ilsa always remembered the days because she tied little knots in her apron to count. An old woman got off the train. She was very old, with a face like crumpled paper, but with eyes that were bright, brighter than the sky over Marienbad. She wasn't alone. A young man, her grandson probably, led her by the arm. The old woman saw Ilsa's flower basket and stopped. She examined the flowers like a work of art, not like merchandise. She took them out one by one, smelled each, as if she were reading a book. Ilsa stood still and let her. That was rare, a person who understood flowers not just to buy them, but truly. "I used to grow flowers," said the old woman, in German, but with an accent from far away, probably Hungary or Transylvania. "I had a garden as big as the world, but the world has grown smaller, and my garden with it." She bought 3 roses, white, red, pink, and told Ilsa that the roses, in order from light to dark, showed a path. "That's life," she said. "Light at the beginning, then darker and darker until the end, but beautiful all the time." The old woman sat on a bench on the platform, and the grandson sat beside her, and together they looked at the roses as if they were reading a book in another language, a language only gardens could speak. Ilsa watched this from her place with the basket, and she saw in this scene something sacred, something that shouldn't have been possible in this time, but was there. Ilsa wrapped the flowers with special care. She didn't know what to say, but she felt that something important was happening here. She gave the old woman not just roses, but also a free lily of the valley. "For hope," said Ilsa, and the old woman smiled as if she'd just found her granddaughter, not a flower seller. The grandson paid the few coins, and the old woman walked toward the spa hotel, the bouquet in her trembling hands. The lily of the valley was a mistake. Ilsa couldn't afford it. The money she would have earned that day was tightly measured, but the mistake stayed in her heart, not as a loss, but as a gain. That night, as she went home, back to her small apartment, which she'd decorated with flower garlands to make it less lonely, Ilsa understood that her job wasn't to sell flowers. It was to give them away. Every flower she sold was a gift to a person who would die, and the flower would die before them. And that was a warning, a message, a constant lesson about how precious beauty was when it passed quickly. Days later, it was a Saturday, the grandson came back to the platform, alone. He bought 2 white roses. "My grandmother died," he said, "this morning. She was 89 years old." Ilsa didn't ask how it happened. That wasn't important. What mattered? She still held the roses in her hand when she died, the white and the red. She'd put the pink one on her bedside table, and she watched it the whole time. She said the flowers were her friends. The grandson paid, but Ilsa gave him 2 carnations and a lily of the valley, again free. The circle closed. The old woman was gone, but her flowers had been with her, and that was a grace. Ilsa worked on that platform for many more years. The years flowed together like water, and every year the same heat, the same longing for flowers. She sold thousands of flowers, or tens of thousands, who counted, and each flower carried its story with it, who it belonged to, what it meant. A woman from Munich always bought carnations for her dying husband. A boy from Prague bought a rose for his first love. A king, or was it just a wealthy man, bought 100 flowers at once to decorate his house. Ilsa saw all that and remembered everything. She had no notebook, but she had her memory, which was like a garden full of stories planted like seeds in good soil. Until 1938. Then everything changed. The world twisted, and Marienbad was no longer safe. There were new rules, and Ilsa was a woman who lived alone, who sold flowers, who dreamed of gardens. That was suspicious. She packed her few things and left. Nobody knew where. She might have gone to Vienna, back to relatives, or she might simply have disappeared like so many. But the flowers she'd sold wandered on into the hands of dying people, into the hearts of grandsons, into the memories of people like me who heard the story and understood. That flowers aren't decoration, but letters from beauty to people who didn't know there was still something to see besides pain. And when the train stops somewhere now, and I smell this unlikely scent of flowers, I know Ilsa is still there, on a platform that no longer exists, selling flowers to people who've already died. And all of that is good, because the flowers don't wilt anymore, and the people don't die anymore, and the circle of beauty finally closes forever. My eyes grew heavy, so heavy, as if someone had gently laid a warm hand on my eyelids and said, "Now it's good. Now it's enough for today." And I heard the train, ta-dum, ta-dum. And I heard the quiet breathing of another traveler already asleep. And I heard the distant rush of wind at the window panes. And all these sounds were like a gentle blanket laid over me, layer by layer, warmth by warmth, until I felt nothing but the train's quiet glide through the night. Sometimes, when I hear the wires singing in this night, the power lines outside the train humming and wailing in the wind, I remember Magda, the telegraphist at East Station in Vienna, spring 1924. A name no one knows anymore, a sound that sounded exactly like these wires, a quiet, invisible hum of message, of urgency, of distance that needed to be brought closer. Magda was 28, slender, with eyes the color of ink, dark, quick-drying, saturated with other people's secrets. She sat at East Station in a small room, bright, full of clicking telegraph keys and thin white paper rolls, where she caught the world's messages like a fisherman catches fish. East Station was Vienna's soul back then, not the elegant soul of the West, but the hidden, pulsing, mysterious soul, where trains came from Budapest, from Bucharest, from the East, full of people, hopes, tragedies. Magda was the guardian of this communication, the woman who knew what people said when they couldn't look each other in the eye. She'd had this job for 3 years. She spoke fluent German, Hungarian, a bit of Romanian, and even less Polish, but enough to understand what the words meant. Her supervisor, Director Molnar, said Magda was one of the best telegraphists in the office. That meant fast, reliable, discreet. The last point was important. Magda read telegrams about debts, affairs, secret meetings, families' ruin, births of illegitimate children. She read all this and kept it to herself, like a priest in a confessional. That was her way of loving life, preserving secrets, keeping the world running by staying silent. Her workplace was a small chessboard of metal and wood, full of plugs and switches that looked like the organ of a strange church. The clicking of the telegraph keys was her prayer book. She didn't just type the words, she prayed them in a kind of rhythm that kept her heart connected to the world's heart. East Station was full every day of people, hasty, desperate, hopeful, and many came by to send a telegram, "Arriving tomorrow, have arrived, please forgive me." Magda translated all that into electrical impulses down the wires into the darkness, where other telegraphists like her, invisible sisters, turned the messages back into words. It was an invisible network of women holding the world together without the world noticing. On that April morning, it was spring, the Danube was mighty with meltwater, and the trees in Vienna were starting to bloom. A man came into the telegraph room. He wasn't young, but not old either, with a face furrowed by travel. He wasn't wearing the usual clothes of a businessman. It was more the clothes of someone who was lost, but not in place, but in time. He asked Magda in German, with a strange accent, probably Balkan, probably loss in it, if she could send a telegram to Budapest, straight away, urgent. The address was a hotel. The text was short, just 2 sentences. I live. Do not come. Signature, V. Magda looked at this man, and something in his eyes told her this wasn't a normal telegram. It was a message from a dead man who could still move. His hands trembled as he laid the paper on her table, paper written with the handwriting of someone everything had been torn from. She sent it off quickly, without hesitation. That was her job. But she didn't forget him. She couldn't forget him because the 2 sentences got stuck in her like splinters. I live. Do not come. What did that mean? Were they the last words, or the first of a new life? As she tapped the key, she felt the responsibility that these few tapping sounds, these electrical impulses, could mean the difference between hope and hopelessness for someone sitting 100 kilometers away on the Danube and waiting. The man came back 3 days later. This time his face was even more furrowed. This time he didn't ask to send a telegram, but to receive one, or rather, to check if one had arrived. It had, 2 hours after he left. The answer was also short. Come. Magda watched all the color drain from his face as she spoke these 2 one-syllable words. Come. That was all the forgiveness, all the hope, all the return, compressed into a word that had flown over 100 kilometers of wire, faster than a thought. She watched him take the piece of paper she gave him, the original telegram with the name of the hotel, the city, the date and time. In that moment, Magda understood that she'd saved a person. Not with her hands, not with weapons or medicine, but with her ability to be silent, to be quick, and simply to be the bridge between 2 hearts. His thanks was a quiet nod. He gave her no coin, gave her nothing but that look which said, You've changed my life. He left the room, and Magda heard his footsteps echo down the corridor. To the station, probably. To the train to Budapest. To the person calling him. In that moment, she thought that perhaps every telegraph stroke, every click of her keys, was a kind of love the world couldn't see. That night, as Magda went home, she understood something about her work she hadn't understood before. She wasn't just a machine typing words. She was the connection itself between people who couldn't see each other. She was the bridge over which hope flowed. And that this job was paid so little, barely enough for a small apartment and bread, was because the world didn't know how valuable it was to have someone who translated love into Morse code and sent it over wires. The stars hung over Vienna that night, and Magda walked along the Danube Canal, and she knew that somewhere on this water a man saw the same moonlight, and that what had bound him to her would continue to, across all the distance, through all the years that still lay ahead. Magda never saw that man again. She didn't know if he went to Budapest, if he crossed the bridge, if he arrived to the person who needed him so desperately. But she knew she was part of that story, the invisible, unconscious, necessary part. She was the woman at the telegraph who had delivered the come, who had perhaps saved or destroyed a person's life, and she didn't know which. That was the strange thing about this job. You end up in the middle of other people's stories without ever finding out how they go on. She continued working at East Station. In 1938, the station closed for 2 years. There was one crisis, then another, then a restructuring. When it reopened, Vienna wasn't the same. Magda stayed until the war, until the end. She died in 1947, quietly in her bed, with a small radio next to her. She liked listening to news, hid herself in other people's voices, the distant telegrams that now flew through the air, not over wires anymore. She trusted the world, and the world trusted her with its secrets. That was all you could ask for from a life. And now, in this night, I hear those wires singing, and I know Magda is still here, not as a ghost, but as a force. The force that connects 2 people who can't see each other. The force of 2 words. I live. come, that fly between heaven and earth, invisible but infinitely precious. And somewhere the man from the hotel arrived at someone who was waiting for him. It must be so. It must be. And as the train rolled further through the night, ta-dum, ta-dum, I noticed how my thoughts grew slower, how the images in my head grew softer, how the edges blurred. The voices I'd heard became a gentle hum, a hum like distant bees, or like an old song you heard as a child and now can't quite remember. The warm current of air in the compartment wrapped around me like a blanket, and I felt how my shoulders sank very slowly downward, how the tension of the day fell away from me piece by piece, like leaves falling from a tree, without haste, without sorrow. There are moments in the night when time feels like paper, thin, terrible, ready to take us into another year. I sit here, and suddenly I hear it, a particular squeak of the carriage door, the smell of damp paper and printer's ink, and I think of Gertrude, the newspaper seller at Potsdam Station, winter 1931. Gertrude was small, not by nature, but because poverty made you small. Small in the shoulders, small in your voice, small in your expectations of happiness. She was 37, but really much older. Older than stones, older than the station clock that hadn't worked properly since 1927. She stood on the platform of the Berlin-Potsdam train with a stack of newspapers in her arms, the headlines black and desperate, as always in this time. Her coat was gray, worn, with pockets full of change that was never enough. The winter of 1931 was cold, not like normal winter, but a kind of cold that came from the heart and froze everything. She knew every regular passenger, the lawyer Richter, who bought the Vossische Zeitung on Mondays and Fridays, Miss Schmeiser, the teacher, who always asked for the feuilleton, old Herr Volkmann with his mustache, who'd been buying the same newspaper for 4 years, as if it would save his son. It didn't save him. His son had become unemployed in 1928, and now, in 1931, there were millions of sons like him. Gertrude knew this because the newspapers told her every day in giant letters with photos of soup queues and empty factories. Her hands were always cold. The cold didn't come only from outside, but also from inside, from a kind of sadness that had eaten into her bones. But Gertrude's voice remained warm. That was her gift, her small miracle. She could call Vossische like a song, even though the paper in her hands described bankruptcies and famines. The station wasn't large. It was a branch station, not like Berlin, with its gleaming counters and elegant people. Here came the workers, the clerks, the women heading out to do laundry. They all knew Gertrude. She was like the station building itself, a constant, unmovable part of the landscape of daily dying, and yet invisible. On that December morning, it was snowing lightly, the flakes melting immediately on Gertrude's newspaper stack. A young girl came whom she didn't know. She was perhaps 16, with a face like a photograph from better times. She asked quietly, "Do you have newspapers for artists, for poetry?" Gertrude didn't understand the question straight away, but then she saw it in the girl's eyes. Hope. The strangest currency, especially in 1931. She gave the girl a copy of the Neue Rundschau, free, from money she needed for bread. The girl came again. Every day for a month, at the same time, she bought a different newspaper, always something with art or literature, always with that trembling, questioning voice. Her name was Herta, and she told Gertrude, while waiting, that she wanted to be an actress. In Berlin, in these times, with nothing. Gertrude listened while she sold newspapers, and what she heard wasn't Herta's dream, but something else. It was a person who refused to die like all the others. Herta read the headlines: world economic crisis, mass unemployment, hunger in the cities, and she said, "I don't care about that. I have to play Hamlet." These words stayed in Gertrude like a splinter. She repeated them in her head while she kept selling. Vossische, Kreuzzeitung, Neue Rundschau. Herta came with a schoolbook under her arm, probably helped by an aunt or found in a library. She didn't need money, she just needed to read the newspapers. She was searching for announcements, for plays, for names of directors who might still need someone. Gertrude saw that, and it touched her heart. She began to set aside Herta's favorite journals, the good editions with theater reviews, and Herta bought them all. That was love, Gertrude thought, setting aside hope for a young girl. Gertrude had never had such a thing herself. She had only newspapers, and they only told stories of dying. But on this night, when I think of her, I suddenly understand. The newspapers she sold weren't just news. They were small, resistive papers that said, "The world is still here. Look, it's shrinking, but it's not all gone yet." That was her work. That was Gertrude's magic. She wasn't selling paper, but relentless reality and, strangely enough, with it also the small, cracked hope that people like Herta would read it and dream anyway. In December 1931, when Herta came for the last time, she brought Gertrude something homemade, an apple cake, dry and hard, but made with love and no sugar. Gertrude didn't eat it straight away. She saved it like a relic. She showed this cake to no one. This was between her and Herta, an agreement without words. That some people remember you exist, that you're not just a statue at the station, but someone who can also be hungry, who can also have a heart. Gertrude ate the cake 3 days later, in pieces, and each piece tasted like a dream someone else had had for her. In January 1932, Herta didn't come anymore. Gertrude didn't ask why. She knew the answers were in the newspapers, in headlines about banks closing, about people being arrested, about hopes uprooted like trees in a storm. Gertrude waited a few weeks, then sought out Herta. She went to the street the girl had mentioned, in a poor area of Potsdam, where the houses were small and the windows had no curtains. She found her finally, Herta, grown thin, with puffy eyes from tears and poor sleep. She was working in a laundry 13 hours a day for the same amount Gertrude earned with newspapers. Gertrude said nothing about theater or Hamlet. She gave the girl money, 5 pennies, more than she could afford, and a newspaper, the latest edition with a picture of a theater performance in Vienna. "Look," said Gertrude, "they're still playing. Everywhere, they're still playing." Herta disappeared from Gertrude's life in the year when Berlin stopped being Berlin. She didn't come anymore to the laundry on the days Gertrude tried to meet her there. Perhaps she went to Vienna, perhaps with an actor she'd met. Perhaps just left, away from this city that devoured dreams. Gertrude looked in the newspapers for a name, Herta Müller, Herta Weber. There were too many possibilities, but she found nothing. That was good, Gertrude thought. It meant Herta hadn't been arrested, wasn't on a death list, just kept on living somewhere, under another name perhaps, acting in small theaters, to few audiences, but acting. Gertrude stayed at the platform. In 1933 came new newspapers with different headlines, headlines Gertrude no longer wanted to sell. But she did anyway, because you couldn't refuse work, and because somewhere, somehow, people still needed newspapers to know they were still alive. She died in 1952, Gertrude, in bed, with newspapers around her like old friends. No one remembered her, no family, no neighbors who could have said grand words about her. But the newspapers she'd sold were still somewhere, in archives, in cellars, in the hands of people who remembered that a small woman at the station had helped them understand the world. And somewhere, in a still living woman perhaps, in an actress who played Hamlet, Gertrude's memory lived on, her voice warm and unforgettable, like an old song that called "Vossische," like an invitation into life. And here in this night, as I hear this smell of damp paper, this squeak of the door, I know Gertrude is still there. She's still selling from carriage to carriage, invisible, offering travelers hope in the form of newspapers. The headlines change, but the work remains the same. To bear witness, to report, to pass on. And sometimes, just sometimes, to show a young person that dreams are possible, even when the newspaper tells you every day otherwise. You know, sometimes the tiniest moment is enough, and suddenly you're not here in your modern compartment anymore, but somewhere else. I'm driving through the night just now, and there I notice it. On the wall above my head, an old, brass-colored lamp fitting, darkly patined, with a fine scratch that looks like a scar. A name is engraved there, so old that you can barely read it anymore. The train rocks gently, and in this moment, I don't know why, I think of Anna, the waitress in the Salon Car of the Orient Express, autumn 1928. Anna was 25 then, with black hair that she wore under a white cap pulled tighter than necessary because that's what the head wanted. She was from Salzburg, which you could tell from a certain light in her eyes, a kind of Highland melancholy that came not from yesterday, but from always. The Salon Car of the Orient Express was a cabinet of marble, mahogany, silk, and flickering gas lamps. The windows rose to the ceiling, and at night everything, the railway tables with their small brass wheels, the white damask cloths, the glasses and felt holders, looked like a theater without an audience, only with Anna. She served champagne with a gesture she'd learned in Vienna, somewhere on the Danube probably, in a tavern that had long ceased to exist. Not by pushing the bottle forward, but by opening it almost with sorrow, as if something fragile were coming into being. The passengers, wealthy, harried, some with damp eyes from farewells, watched her with a kind of quiet respect. She knew who liked which wine, though no name was repeated. This train ran once a week, and the company changed, but Anna remembered. That was her small magic. On that autumn evening, it was October, the plains of Hungary rolling dark beneath the wheels. A man entered the compartment, older, with a gray mustache, his face marked by madness or genius. He wore the uniform of a musician, but it was no costume. It was like his skin. He ordered water, only water, and Anna saw in that moment that he was completely alone, though 100 trains were carrying him. She understood that. She set his glass on the table, and her hand didn't tremble, but her eyes asked something silent. "Shall I see you?" He nodded imperceptibly, and in that lay a whole life. The man wasn't Strauss. Anna didn't know who he was, but in the way he drank his water, in the way he traced the rhythm of the train with his fingers on the table, she recognized someone who could breathe music the way other people breathe. She didn't ask who he was. That wasn't the etiquette of the Salon Car. But she brought him a small glass of water every hour, and each time he looked up and smiled as if she were coming from the only place in the world where fresh water still existed. It was a strange feeling watching him. The other passengers that night were the usual. A couple from Vienna who barely spoke to each other, an English businessman with a golden watch, an Italian countess eating eternal ice, though it was October. They drank, ate, spoke in muted tones about stock markets and scandals. But this man, he was like music that only Anna could hear. His hands moved constantly, not nervously, but like a conductor wanting to reassemble the world. Once, as Anna passed to change napkins, she saw notes on his paper, fleeting, almost illegible symbols that looked like thoughts in flight. She thought of her time in Vienna, of the waitress training, which was quick, 2 weeks, then into the world of elegant people. But no one had told her she'd need to recognize souls. No one had taught her that serving water could be an act of love. Her grandmother in Salzburg would probably have laughed at such thoughts, but here, beneath the gas lamps, surrounded by mahogany and silence, Anna suddenly understood that being a waitress could be something sacred, if you did it with full strength and understanding. The smell of the train was peculiar, a mixture of coal, old leather, and rose oil, which the head sprayed on the white cloths. Anna didn't smell it as stench, but as history. Each of these odors was a memory. The coal came from the force that drove the man steering this train. The leather came from overflowing suitcases with secrets. The rose oil was hope that beauty remained even in motion. That night she smelled it all more strongly because this man with his water and his notes had changed the whole air. The Salon Car was no longer just a train, but a concert hall gliding through the Hungarian plain. All night they traveled through Hungary, and Anna worked like a priestess. She opened bottles, polished glasses, changed napkins with an elegance that needed discretion to be true. But beneath all that, as she served, she watched this man, how he gazed out the window at landscapes he might one day compose. The brass fittings in the Salon Car walls glowed in the gaslight like little moons, and Anna thought, for the first time in a long while, that she was truly happy. Not because of the money, not because of the elegant surroundings, but because she was where something real was happening. Around midnight came another question. A rich industrialist asked Anna about his watch, whether it was gold. It was, and Anna described the gleam with a kind of pallid politeness. But as she spoke, she saw out of the corner of her eye that the musician closed his eyes, and she knew with absolute certainty that he wasn't sleeping, but listening. He was listening to the monotony of the world, to the questions of the wealthy about material, to the relentlessness of the past. And then he opened his eyes and looked directly at Anna, as if to say, "That's not all, is it? There's more." Anna nodded imperceptibly, and in that moment something bound them together, something without name, without future, but absolutely present. She withdrew to polish glasses and left the man alone with the song only he could play. The next morning, the man left the train in Budapest without looking back. The other waitress, Marie, older, bitter, said he'd forgotten to leave a tip. But Anna had learned something different, that the most important moments are always incomplete, that true encounter needs no confirmation. She polished the brass fitting above her place and thought of music she couldn't play, but that ran on in her like a train without stops. The next journeys were quieter. Anna served champagne to wealthy people with closed hearts, but she didn't look down on them. She understood that everyone would eventually leave, alone, and that a waitress's task was to renounce the hope for completion and simply to fill the glasses. She grew older in this Salon Car, not because of the years, but because she'd learned that beauty comes from renunciation. She stayed until 1933. Then there were no more Orient Express runs. Then many things didn't exist anymore. But that autumn night in Hungary, with the silent musician and the water that tasted like music, she took that with her. She took it everywhere until the last moment, when she died alone, with no one to remember who she'd been. But I remember, here in this night, in a modern train, with that old brass fitting above my head, I remember. Anna didn't die. She fell asleep in the rhythm of the train, and every time a train travels through the night, it carries her with it, her quiet dignity, her ability to see what was truly real. And now I travel in this night, just like Anna once did. And the feeling is like an old song I never quite forgot. The rails sing beneath me, and I know that Anna is here too, somewhere between the lights, serving, watching, waiting, until the dream takes me as well. There's a moment, right before the train enters the tunnel, when everything grows still. Even the wheels seem to breathe. And then you hear her. The voice isn't from outside. It doesn't come from the tunnel to speak to you. It comes from the tunnel and is the tunnel. and the tunnel is the voice. It's a female voice, gentle and older, like someone who's told long stories finally has a story for you. "Hello," says the voice, and the word doesn't echo. It's as if the voice were embracing you. "I'm the tunnel," or I'm what the tunnel says when someone like you listens. You can't answer, not because you can't speak, but because it's not necessary. The voice already knows everything you'd say. She knows you're afraid of the dark. She knows you hope to see light again at the other end. She knows you're sleeping without knowing it. The tunnel is very long, or very short. You can't tell which. Time works differently here, just like throughout this train story. Minutes could be hours. An hour could be just a sigh. You notice your body becoming lighter, that the heaviness normally pulling you down no longer concerns you here. It's as if the tunnel lifts you, carries you, doesn't let you fall. "All people fear tunnels," says the voice. "Not because of darkness, but because they travel through them too fast. They don't want to see what the tunnel has to show them. So they close their eyes or look at their phone or try to sleep. But and here the voice grows even quieter, even more tender, I want to show you everything. And that's why you're here." The light in the compartment becomes dark blue. The train goes deeper into the tunnel, and with each meter the darkness grows deeper. But it's not frightening darkness. It's a gentle, inviting darkness, like night isn't the opposite of day, but it's rest. "I am," says the voice, "the boundary between what was and what comes. People drive through me without knowing they're entering a new world. The tunnel is never just darkness. The tunnel is transformation." You notice now that your eyes have grown accustomed to the darkness, and as they do, you suddenly see colors, not in the tunnel, but behind the darkness. Colors that don't normally exist, colors that only exist in dreams or in the moments just before falling asleep, when consciousness dances between two worlds. "Look around you," says the voice. "The wall of the tunnel isn't black. It's full of memories. People have passed through this tunnel before you, millions of them, and each has left a story. You need only look." And it's true. As you look, you suddenly see scenes on the tunnel walls, not like films, but like paintings that slowly appear and disappear. A child seeing snow for the first time, an old man looking in the mirror and recognizing his younger self, a woman laughing, but not happily, but relieved. "These memories," says the voice, "aren't from other people. They're from you, from the you who wasn't yet born, from the you who's long since dead, from all the versions of you that might have been." You notice that some of these memories are yours, but many aren't. Yet somehow they're still real to you. It's as if the tunnel stores all the memories of everyone who's ever passed through it and paints them on the walls so new travelers can see them. That's the tunnel's offer. Look, you're not the first. You won't be the last. You're part of a great chain of people who've all experienced the same thing, all traveled through this darkness, and all of them arrived safely. The train slows. It's as if the tunnel isn't endless, but a place where time rests itself. And you notice it's actually not uncomfortable for you. Here, in this darkness, with this voice that's not really a voice, but a presence, you feel at home. "I'm not evil," says the voice, and you notice you haven't asked that question, but the voice answers anyway. "I'm not what you must fear. I'm what you need. The tunnel is the place where you lose yourself, so you can find yourself." Another traveler walks down the corridor. You don't recognize them, but the voice seems to know them. "This man," says the voice, "is afraid of tunnels, but every evening when he falls asleep, his dream drives through a tunnel like this one, and every morning when he wakes, he's forgotten he was afraid. That's the secret." "What's the secret?" you ask without speaking. but the voice understands you. The secret is, sometimes there's no other way. Sometimes you have to drive through the darkness to reach the light, and sometimes during the journey you notice that the darkness isn't dark, but a different kind of light. A light that doesn't blind, a light that heals. The voice of the tunnel grows quieter, and you notice she's not just speaking to you, but also singing. It's as if the tunnel itself is a long melody, a melody so deep that you don't hear it with your ears, but with your soul, with your bones, with the deepest of your heart. And this melody tells you, it's safe here. It's dark, but it's safe. Nothing evil can reach you here. The tunnel itself is a refuge, a place where you can lose yourself and still not feel alone. The tunnel grows warmer, not hot, but warm, like when you get under a blanket on a cold autumn evening, when everything outside is asleep, but here you're safe. The voice becomes song, not words, but tones, a melody that goes straight to your heart. I sing for everyone who passes through me, says the voice in song. I sing for the fearful and for the brave. I sing for those who sleep and for those who dream. I sing so you know you're not alone in the darkness, that no one has to travel alone. The walls of the tunnel glow now, not from outside, but from within. It's as if all the memories, all the dreams, all the moments of millions of people who've passed through this tunnel are now glowing all at once. And in that glow, you recognize not just other people, but yourself, in all your different versions, in all your different forms. You see how young you were. You see how you grow older. You see how you sleep and dream and wake and sleep again. It's like watching a long film of your own life, but not sadly, but with a deep understanding that everything that was is still here now. The train still travels through the tunnel, but slower now. The voice becomes a whisper, and the whisper becomes a breath, and the breath becomes your breath. You realize that you've been the voice all along, that the tunnel is your breath, that the train doesn't drive through the tunnel, but the tunnel carries you through your own darkness, gently, safely to the other end, where light waits, not to blind you, but to welcome you. And as you have this realization, as your eyes close and your head sinks, the tunnel's voice whispers in your ear, not with fear, but with infinite tenderness. Sleep. The tunnel will look after you. The tunnel will carry you home. And when you wake, you won't know that you ever passed through this tunnel. But you'll feel refreshed. You'll know that you're safe, that out there, behind the darkness, there's always a light that waits for you. If you listen carefully, you can hear them all ticking. Not asynchronously like clocks normally do, but perfectly in sync, a single great heartbeat running through the whole train. Tick, tick, tick. There's only one reason why the clocks in the night train tick so. They no longer measure normal time. They measure the time of sleep. And in sleep, time is different. It's more generous, deeper, fuller of meaning. You sit in your compartment and notice the ticking doesn't disturb you. It soothes you. Every tick is an assurance that time hasn't failed, that you're still here, that you're still sleeping, that this is all still real. The clocks on the wall, there are 3 of them, all show exactly the same time, 23:47. But it's not normal time. The numbers shimmer in a violet that doesn't exist in normal life, the violet of dreams. As you listen, you notice the ticking changes, not faster or slower, but more organic. It's as if the train itself were ticking, the wheels beneath you, the rails it travels on, even your own blood. Everything follows the same rhythm. The night train is a giant clock, and you're inside it. You're part of its time. Beside you sits an old man. You don't know when he sat down. He was simply always there, since you woke from a dream in which you were already sleeping. He holds a large pocket watch made of gold and so heavy that you can feel its weight. He opens it, and instead of a clock face, it shows something else. 2 hands embracing again and again in a slow, endless waltz. "That's the time of the heart," says the old man, and his voice is like coffee, warm and bitter at once. "That's the time that counts when you sleep. Clock time is quick, minute after minute, hour after hour. But heart time? It can make a minute last 1,000 years. You nod. You understand that straight away. It's true. In your deepest dreams, when you're only sleeping and nothing else, seconds can become centuries. You can live a whole life in the time between midnight and dawn. The man closes the pocket watch again. "The clocks here," he says, "are all tuned to the same frequency. Not to the hours, not to the minutes, but to sleep itself. They tick in the rhythm of your breath. They tick in the rhythm of your heart. That's why you hear them all at once. They're your breath, your heart, only doubled, tripled, multiplied tenfold, until it sounds like the music of the whole world." You look at the clocks on the wall. It's true. The longer you watch them, the more you notice their ticking is synchronized with your heartbeat. Your heart goes faster, so do the clocks. Your heart slows, so do they. It's not that the clocks follow your heart. It's that they're the same thing. A child sits beside the old man. You only notice it now. The child is occupied with a clock so small it fits in the palm of a hand. The child turns it over, examines it from all sides. "Why is this clock different?" asks the child. "Because it runs backwards," says the old man. "It shows the time that lies behind you. Not to make you sad, but to show you that everything that's past is still with you, still a part of your time." The lights in the compartment are dark blue, and they pulse gently with the clocks. You notice now that every clock in this train, and there are many, so many that you can't count them, tells its own story. One clock shows a face instead of numbers, another shows landscapes instead of hands, a third shows moving water droplets falling downward like sand in an hourglass, but without sand, just the eternal fall. There's a clock with no numbers, only a single hand that constantly points upward. "That's the hope clock," says the old man. "It doesn't show how much time has passed. It shows how much time still lies ahead of you. When you sleep, you always have a hope clock inside you." Beside the hope clock, you see another clock where 2 black hands circle each other endlessly, never touching. "That's the clock of loneliness," the old man explains. "But look more closely. The hands aren't isolated. They follow the same path. They dance together. Loneliness on this train isn't real loneliness. Here, we're all together in the darkness, and that makes us connected, not separate. The other passengers are all deeply asleep, but you're still half awake, and that's why you see all these clocks. If you were completely asleep, you wouldn't see them anymore. You'd only hear them. And hearing is better than seeing. Hearing is like love, like a promise constantly repeated. It's strange to observe how peaceful the sleeping people are. A woman opposite smiles, and you wonder what clocks tick in her dream. A child with closed eyes breathes calmly, and you know that her heart leads all the train's clocks. The old man seems to understand what you're thinking. "Everyone on the train," he says, "has an inner clock that ticks just like these ones. And when we all tick together, we form something greater, a chorus of time that carries us all." The old man stands now. He doesn't disappear suddenly. He becomes slowly transparent until you can see through him to the train's windows. "The clocks will carry you home," he says. And the last words are so quiet that you're not sure whether he said them or whether you only heard them in your beating heart. As long as you hear their ticking, you're not lost. The pocket watch he held falls to the floor and opens. But instead of breaking, it simply vanishes, and in its vanishing you see for the first time that all the clocks in the train are one single clock, connected through invisible threads of time and dream. They're one clock with millions of faces, millions of clock faces, but only one heart. Your heart. The heart of the train. The child places the small backward ticking clock in your lap. It has no face, or its face is so blurred that you can't see it, and it walks down the corridor, following the old man into the darkness of the train. The clocks tick faster now, not fearfully faster, but excitedly faster, as if they know sleep is coming. That great, deeper, more healing sleep is coming. And you notice your eyes growing increasingly heavy, not because you're tired, but because the clocks are telling you, it's time. It's time to sleep deeply. Your fingers curl around the little clock the child gave you. It ticks backward, yes, but it doesn't tick faster. It seems to lead you into your past, not to hold you there, but to show you that all the moments you've ever lived are still ticking somewhere now. They don't sleep. They only wait to share dreams with you. The clock in your lap grows warm, and you hold it tight, as if it were holding your own heart. Around you, all the clocks tick, and it's no longer a multitude of sounds. It's a symphony, a song only sleep can sing. Every clock is a voice, and together they form a chorus that says, "You're safe. You're loved. You won't be left alone." For everywhere in the world, clocks are ticking, and they're all ticking for you, all telling your story, all holding you as you sleep, as you sink deeper. Where time has no meaning anymore, and only heart time counts. Only the ticking that carries you home. The train rolled gently on, and outside the world was now completely dark. Just a few lights in the distance, single windows where other people were also coming to rest. I thought about how many people in this moment were falling asleep all over the world, each in their bed, in their compartment, in their room, and how we were all part of a great, quiet movement. A movement into sleep. The rhythm of the wheels on the rails, ta-dum, 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 was like the breathing of a great, friendly animal that carried us all together through the darkness, through time.